you very much indeed. I want to start by thanking Nancy for organising this event to allow me to practice terrifying myself, because I think it's something that we all need to do every now and then. So I think we have all been terrified, so terrified that our minds just stop. Have you ever felt so out of your depth that nothing makes sense anymore? I'm seeing some nods, good. I want to share a couple of experiences that I've had where I found myself in that situation and I've used one tool to get myself through it. But although I've used one tool, those two experiences could not be more different. In December of last year, just a couple of months ago, I was swimming the Molokai Channel, and it's one of the 7 toughest swims in the world. It's a 27-mile non-stop swim. You don't stop, you don't rest, you don't touch the boat. Don't feel too bad for me. It is in Hawaii. You know, there are some perks, but it is relentless. And 12 hours of that swim is in the pitch black. It's so dark that you actually wonder if you have your eyes open at all. There's no points of reference. There's no horizon. You're lost. You are swimming face down in the water hour after hour, and you lose all points of reference. So you have to let go of how you would normally make sense in the day of where you are. The water is constantly moving your sense of balance, so you become completely disoriented, and your internal world becomes so much greater and louder than anything going on around you. You're completely at the mercy of your mind, totally. The only human contact I have on those swims are every hour I flip onto my back, I get handed a bottle, I drink for 20 or 30 seconds, hand it back, flip over, and it's gone again. And in those 20 or 30 seconds, you flip onto your back in the night and like, wow, because you've been face down in like sensory deprivation. So when you turn on your back, the night sky is like a riot of stars and satellites tracking, and space dust is all of a sudden psychedelic, and you feel a little bit wobbly. You do have some company on these swims in the sense that you have a pilot boat. And that's usually a 30-foot fishing vessel. But in the Pacific, it's so choppy and so rough that the pilot boat doesn't stay close to you. It goes ahead 200 or so yards, and then you swim slowly up to it. And then it goes ahead 200 yards, and you slowly swim up to it. All I have personally for company in the mass Pacific Ocean is a 6'9" kayak. It's essentially a bath toy. So there I am, 1 o'clock in the morning. I've had 4 or 5 hours of darkness. The boat has just gone ahead, 200 yards. I lift my head to take a fuel stop, and I hear the words that all swimmers dread. The words that can be summed up in 2 syllables. Da-dun. Da-dun. The guy in the kayak said, "Beth, please don't tip me out, but there's a shark behind you." So I turn around, and all I see normally is starlight reflecting on horizontal little divots of waves. And yet I see one that's vertical. And it took a couple of seconds for me to recognize what I was seeing. And about 5 meters away, I saw the fin and the bow wave of the shark coming down towards me. And at that point, I did what all self-respecting sane people do. I laughed. Because see, I'd done my homework to allay the fear. I'd researched different kinds of sharks that would be in the Hawaiian waters. I'd given myself shark drills so that I'd become confident enough to sock a shark in the jaw and valiantly carry on swimming, in my dreams, of course. But I had failed to absorb the one common knowledge fact about warm water sharks is that most of them are nocturnal, so I wouldn't have seen it coming. Whoops! So the guy in the kayak, he switched his torch onto main beam so we could see into the water a little bit. And I saw this sort of looming shape. And it was so shallow and so close, I had to lift my legs to have this shark swim underneath me. And that's when I realized that the shark was bigger than the kayak. And that was when my mind fragmented. And you kind of hear stories of your life passing before your eyes. And in that moment, time stops. So I was aware of the physical body going through survival of whatever it does. But in my head, I was screaming, "What are you doing here?" And seriously, why are you doing this? And I decided to calm myself down by telling myself, by answering that question, because I knew damn well how I'd got to that point. See, when I was growing up, I grew up on a farm, very, very active life, out in the countryside. We had animals, and I was up at 6 in the morning doing animals before school and all of that. And at 10, I was struck with an unnamed illness. And, you know, being on a farm, if you didn't have a broken limb and a temperature, you expect it to be life as normal. So I limped along, feeling like I was swimming through treacle. And I'd get maybe 2 or 3 months of reprieve every now and then, where I'd be captain of every sports team. I was very, very active, and then wham, gone again for no apparent reason. And the more I pushed myself to be normal, the bigger the crashes became. And I never recovered, and that marred my whole adolescence until when I was 17, I woke up one day and I couldn't walk. Just like that, my legs just didn't work. I couldn't even lift my hand to brush my hair. It was like molten metal running through my veins. The pain was so excruciating that bulimia with anorexic episodes and years of self-harm actually just made me feel something other than this feeling. And I genuinely wished I was dead. I eventually got a diagnosis, retrospectively, of ME, myalgic encephalomyelitis, which felt like a relief because there was a name. But in the second breath, the doctor said, but there's no cure and there's nothing we can do. We don't know if you're ever going to get better. You could be like this for life. Now, take a minute. I was 17 and no future, nothing. Pain, wheelchair for life. It was pretty devastating. So my mum, not one to be beaten by the system, she decided to take me to some alternative therapists to see if I could get at least some symptomatic relief. And she took me to this therapist who packed her out the room and asked me about my life. And that was easy. It just sucked at that stage. And you know, I told him where I'd been and what my life was like. And he listened to me, and he came round the counter and he knelt down beside me. I thought he was going to take my pulse or something. And he said, I'm going to tell you something that's going to make you hate me. He said, everything you've ever done, the way you've done it, the way you've let people treat you, and the way you treat yourself, the way you think about your life has led you to where you are now. You are the only person who can change any of that. Go away, make a bucket list, and give yourself reasons to get better. Now, he got something right. I hated him. I hated him. Because he had basically looked me in the face and told me it was my fault that I was in a wheelchair and I had no future. Hey, Kat. How was I? It was my fault that I was in this wheelchair. So I did go away and I did make that bucket list. And the fury I felt, the incandescent rage at what he was talking to me about, gave me the stimulus to actually learn to live symptom-free using the power of my mind. Now, it wasn't a straight road, and it wasn't an easy road. But when I turned 30, as many of us do, I took stock of my life. And I realised that I had ticked off everything on that bucket list. I'd climbed a mountain, albeit a very small one. I'd built my own house, albeit out of simple stinker wood. I had swum with wild dolphins. I'd even spent a year ordained in a monastery, because hell, who wouldn't wanna? I'd done everything on that list bar one thing, and that was to swim the English Channel. Now, I was just becoming a single mum, which is not everybody's dream cup of tea, and it certainly wasn't on my bucket list. But I realised that my son, who was born with severe learning difficulties, if I was going to show him how to fulfil his potential and how to live his dreams, I was going to have to step up to the plate. So I trained when he was asleep until he was big enough to tow in a dinghy behind me in the water. And 2 years later, I swam my way to France. And when I walked up onto that French shore, I realised and finally appreciated what that therapist had tried to tell me. See, it wasn't my fault, but without taking responsibility for my life, I couldn't change it. And I realised that in my 20s, I'd managed to learn a few bits about taking responsibility for myself. And I realised that I'd become my own hero. By taking the reins and by no longer being afraid to take responsibility, by using my mind and by challenging myself to drive myself forwards for my own happiness, for my own future, that I could live my dream and I could do it. So there I am, 1 o'clock in the morning, with a 2-metre man-eater, 2 metres from me, coming closer. 7-foot tiger shark. The guy in the kayak tried to radio the boat. It was dead. We couldn't get a response. He tried to shout, but 200 foot in open ocean, it's like shouting into a vacuum. So we were alone with this shark. And I knew right in that moment that I had to take control. I couldn't control the situation. The only thing I could control was me, my response. So I ran through the shark drills. I knew I had to stay upright. I had to stay calm. I had to stay focused. I had to breathe. And breathe. And then eventually, 5, 6, 7, 8 perilous minutes later, the pilot boat, came back to see why we weren't moving. It found out, because we told them. And then the shark slunk out of sight. But then with the shark gone out of sight, I had to find a way to get my face back into that pitch black, back being blind, and carry on the next 7 miles, most of them in the dark. And I realised it's not always enough to have a goal. That's somewhere you aim for. It's not always enough to have passion. That's what gets you started. It's not enough to have drive. That gets you so far. But when you hit the wall, when you're broken, what is it that drives you forwards? And I've discovered, through doing very many silly things in my life, that you often have to just let go. You have to let go of the things that are holding you back, the things that stop you from moving forwards. Because we all feel tiredness, we all feel pain, we all feel doubt, we all feel fear. But if we can let those things go in that moment, it allows us to achieve more. It allows us to see beyond, to go beyond. So I challenge you to be the Alan Sugar of your own board meeting. Because if you have a voice in your head that's not yours, fire it. If you have a voice in your head that's yours and you don't like what it says, fire it. If you have a voice in your head that you're comfortable with but it's not working for you, fire it. Because only by letting go of what's not working for you right now in this moment, then you can move forwards. Because it is your life. It's your mind. You can do what you want with it, and it's your life. Thank you very much for listening.